After we bought our Eichler home in Terralinda and started having babies, the salesman at the Eichler Models said to me one day, because I frequently wheeled the baby up in the stroller, he said, "Why don't you work one day a week for me while I have a day off, rather than me closing the office?" And I thought that would be a great idea, because I had by that time become really passionate about Eichler homes. So I did. I started working one day a week. And the general idea was that I would just be answering the phones and greeting people, and we always had 4 model homes in a complex, and I would take them through and send them on their way with a brochure. After a few weeks of that, I thought it would be quite a bit of fun if I got a real estate license, so I could surprise the sales manager when he came back from his day off with a purchase agreement on his desk. So I did that, and in those days it was not very complicated to get a salesman's license. So I began selling houses. Certainly didn't sell one every week, but there were plenty of opportunities to sell houses. By this time, I started working 2 days a week, and I began to really become interested in who the people were who came to the model homes, what caused their response to the advertising in the first place, and then actually who were they when they got there. It became apparent to me that the reaction that we had had at our first Eichler viewing was pretty universal, because most of the people who then were looking to buy homes were returned GIs from World War II, even though it was 5, 6, 7, 8 years later. They had come back from the war, they had completed their education, and many of them had experienced a bit of California during their military career, either on the way to the war or coming back from the war. And of course, many of them fell in love with California and thought it would be ideal before they began their careers to see whether they could do so in California instead of wherever they had grown up. So in talking with people, I realized how foreign and strange the Eichler homes were to them, in addition to which, so were the furnishings. The Herman Miller, the Knoll, and the Swedish furniture, the wonderful Scandinavian design things that we used. In addition to which, the Herman Miller Company's general manager was a man named Gerard, and Mr. Gerard had become a collector of world stature of folk art from all over the world. And he utilized the warmth and the excitement and the color of folk art, indigenous art, with the sleek industrial lines of the contemporary furniture to create a marvelous interior look. Well, this isn't something that people were born knowing about. They needed to learn about it to understand what the purpose of all this was. It was to be humanistic about a quasi-industrial look, and it certainly amalgamated itself beautifully. The model homes were done by various designers, one of whom, and the most important, was Matt Kahn, who was chairman of the Department of Design at Stanford. And Matt had widely traveled. His wife was a well-known, internationally recognized weaver, and she wove beautiful wall hangings and fabrics for tabletops and so on, and they were vibrant colors. We then began to realize that the model homes always had huge plants in them. And in those days, the best people did for indoor plants was to have a series of failing African violets in the windowsill that grandma usually grew. People didn't have indoor plants, and we had huge rubber plants. We had things we had never even seen. So the whole concept of coming to the model homes turned into kind of an education program. When we would go between the houses to see the next model, I then had an opportunity to explain the landscaping. And the landscaping was not done by planting a bunch of geraniums. The landscape designs were done by such people as Lawrence Halprin, Robert Royston, and the like. The result was Thomas Church also did models for us. People began to look at the landscaping differently. They began to look at it, period. Most people never had before. It was usually some ratty grass and a few failing shrubs, and that's how people did landscaping. It became a real education for people to come to the models, and often it would take 3 or 4 or 5 visits before they would realize this was the way they'd like to live. They began to learn about all of this design element and the pleasure it could give them, and they began by spending time there to integrate the idea of living outdoors and indoors, because the model landscaping included always places to be outdoors. People began to look at the landscaping differently. They began to look at it, period. Most people never had before. It was usually some ratty grass and a few failing shrubs, and that's how people did landscaping. It became a real education